Hello, my name is Boruch, and I'm an alcoholic. And we're back with the 10th step based on inspiration from the book of Genesis. This is part of my 60-week project to go through all 12 steps for each of the 5 books of the Old Testament. So I hope you'll join us for today and stick with us each of the coming weeks as we go through the 12 steps 5 times, which will hopefully be good for our recovery. I know it's good for mine. Doing this is always helpful. So let's get started. Today we're going to refer to verse 37:20 in Genesis, which reads, "Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into one of the pits." Now, who is talking here and what is going on? This sounds like a plot to commit murder, and it is. So the people who are saying this, the person who's saying this is one of the brothers of Joseph. Joseph is the son of Jacob, the grandson of Isaac, and the great-grandson of Abraham. This is the lineage of the patriarchs, the founding ancestors of the entire Judeo-Christian tradition. Jacob, as we remember from earlier in Genesis, had 12 sons. One of them was Joseph, and for some reason, Jacob favored Joseph among all others in the family. He gave him a special outfit, which we might have heard of in a show called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Joseph was the favorite son, and his brothers envied him. They resented him. They hated him, partly because Jacob made him the boss. He was the youngest son before his brother Benjamin was born, and he was put in charge of everybody else. So the brothers conspired to kill him. Instead, they threw him into a pit, and he was then sold into slavery in Egypt. And we know the rest of the story, hopefully, where he ends up saving Egypt from the famine and so forth. But at this point, it looks like Joseph's life is over. Now, it's a kind of a shocking moment because you have to appreciate, this is something that comes up a lot in Bible studies. It's very useful not to take things at face value, because you could look at this like, oh, these brothers are being horrible, and they're obviously bad people, and they're going to do a bad thing to their brother. I mean, who conspires to murder their brother, right? That's pretty bad. But that is not the only way to look at this, because these were the sons of Jacob. Each of these other brothers was, if you had met one of these, they would have been like men of great stature, men of achievement, men of wisdom. They were great men. So why on earth would they sit down? And what the sages say is that they sat down and they had like a trial almost with Joseph not there. They channeled all of their wisdom, and they came to the conclusion. This was not some mob scene. This was a carefully deliberated decision made amongst 12 men who are, at least on the surface, very wise and very righteous. So what is going on here? So one of the answers is from the commentary is that they believed that Joseph was going to sort of seize control of the family and therefore seize control over the Israelite nation. He was going to make himself a king over all the others, and they believed that this was wrong and that this was bad for the Israelite nation, and that Joseph would destroy the Israelite nation. So to save what they saw as the future of the Israelite nation, the Jewish people, the Judeo-Christian tradition, really the future of, let's look at half of humanity basically comes out of this tradition. They were going to take action. To save the future, they were going to kill their brother. It was like a death sentence handed down at a carefully argued trial. Now, of course, we know from our perspective that they were mistaken. And if you're an alcoholic, this might start to sound a little familiar. Have you ever made a decision about something and you just knew that you were right? Boy, I am so right about this. I'm going to take action. I know what I'm doing, but you don't. That's the addiction working in our lives. People make decisions, often very, very bad decisions, under the influence of alcohol or drugs or other addictions. And it falls into that, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. It seemed like a good idea to, borrow $50,000 to gamble on football. I knew I was doing the right thing, or I knew it was the right thing to do to, take off for 2 weeks, and leave my family alone because I really needed the time off. But there's so many bad decisions that we make. I mean, not that I've done those things, but I mean, we've all done our version of this, where we just knew, or where we think we're doing the right thing morally, and it's just really our addiction talking. With so many terrible stories that we hear in the rooms of people, cutting off children, or doing this and that in their family, or sabotaging their careers because they just felt they were doing the right thing. The right thing was on their side and they were wrong. And this is something that comes up in the 10th step. Okay, the 10th step is one of those steps that sometimes we kind of go through. Oh yeah, the 10th step, right? Done it. Bye. It's a profound step. The 10th step is really what keeps you sober. You continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And like several steps, it's actually a double step, right? There's two things. You have to take personal inventory, which means staying aware of yourself, what you're doing and how you're acting and how you're treating other people. And then the other half of that is when you're wrong, promptly admitted it, okay? And that's, 7 words that are easy to say and hard to do. First of all, you have to know that you're wrong. That alone can be a monumental accomplishment. And then you have to promptly admit it. And it's funny how life works, because this morning when I am doing this video, I'm actually in a situation in my own life where I realized last night that I was wrong about something, and I better promptly admit it, because otherwise I'm going to carry around a resentment all day, and we know that that is not good for recovery. And the reason to admit that you're wrong is not because you're some kind of weakling. It's to stay sober. If you know you're wrong and you don't admit it promptly, you're going to carry around a resentment or bad emotions about it, and you're going to cause bad interactions with people you're close with, or people who are important to you, like your boss or whatever, and you're going to have problems in your sobriety. And what I think we found, and I'm going to make a generalization, but generally speaking, if you don't take personal inventory and you don't promptly admit that you're wrong about things for a long enough time, you're going to be in danger of going out. We hear this story a lot. People end up relapsing because they just cannot own up to what they're doing or when they're wrong. And this is a problem, So my thoughts for recovery on this, if I can get my computer to behave here, is, have you ever felt that you knew exactly the right thing to do about a situation, but in retrospect it was wrong? Okay. Did you ever decline to take advantage of the wisdom of an older person? This is another issue in the story. These 10 men had a father who could have helped them, to put it mildly. If they were great men, he was a greater man. Jacob was one of the greatest sages and wisest men who ever lived. They could have gone to him with their problem, but instead they decided to figure it out for themselves. Boy, if you're an alcoholic, that might sound familiar, right? You're going to take care of it. I know what I'm doing, right? Okay. And alternatively, they had an even higher authority they could have gone to. They could have gone to God. Are we willing to ask God for guidance? We have God as an assistant in our lives. That's a pretty good thing to have if you take advantage of it. But sometimes we don't, because we think we know better and we won't admit that we're wrong. And that's where trouble starts. So those are some thoughts on the 10th step based on the book of Genesis. If you like what you're hearing here, I hope you'll consider getting the Old Testament 12-Step Recovery Workbook, which is available at the link below. And thank you for being with me today.